chromosomal or genetic abnormality in humans is Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, also called trisomy 21, is a condition in which extra genetic material causes delays in the way a child develops, both mentally and physically.
Down syndrome is a genetic abnormality which is manifested by 3 copies of chromosome 21. And the most important feature of the Down syndrome is intellectual disability, or what used to be called mental retardation.
So Down syndrome is actually one of the most frequent genetic diseases worldwide, particularly in our region, United Arab Emirates. The statistic shows that roughly 1 in 300 women, Emirati women, will have a Down syndrome baby. This has several reasons, but the foremost reason for that is, of course, aging society. Because nowadays the women are getting later their children in life compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, and hence those women are at a higher risk having a Down syndrome fetus, and hence the vast majority of Down syndrome fetuses are not getting to the age being born alive, because in the nature those women are miscarrying. But 25% of the women with a Down syndrome fetus going to the age to deliver the baby in a normal hospital.
So what are the causes or the etiology of Down syndrome? The most common, or 95% of Down syndrome, is caused by trisomy 21, or you have an extra copy or a third copy of the 21st chromosome. If you look at it, to revise the genetics, very simply, a cell has 23 pairs of chromosomes, of 46 chromosomes. Now of these, 22 are autosomes and you have 1 pair of sex chromosomes. Now out of this, the 21st chromosome has an extra copy in Down syndrome, which means there are 3 copies. So how does this happen? This happens most commonly because of what is called a disjunction, or a non-disjunction, or what is called an improper cell division during the formation of the gametes. So what happens is, when it gets transferred to the children in Down syndrome will have a extra genetic material of the 21st chromosome.
Down syndrome, also called trisomy 21, is a condition in which extra genetic material causes delays in the way a child develops, both mentally and physically. Each chromosome carries DNA, called genes, which tell how the brain and body should develop.
Now, there are 3 basic types of Down syndrome. The most common, 95%, is trisomy 21. Now we also have what is called a translocation, or Robertsonian translocation Down syndrome. Now the particular important point here is, this is the only variant of Down syndrome where the genes, where you can have an heritable factor, or it can be inherited from one of the parents. Because trisomy 21 itself is a random event. It is not heritable. But in translocation, what happens is, one part of the 21st chromosome is attached to another chromosome, and most commonly the 14th chromosome. So you have 21st chromosome and you have a part of the 21st chromosome attaching to the 14th chromosome. But here again, you can have either 13, 14, 15, or even 22nd chromosome. There's another pattern again called the mosaic Down syndrome. In mosaic Down syndrome, what happens is, every cell does not have a triple copy of the 21st chromosome. Because when we say trisomy 21, this is there in every cell of the Down syndrome child. But in the mosaic pattern, it is not evident in all the cells, but in some of the cells. So the consequence is that the mosaic pattern or the mosaic type of Down syndrome is a milder form.
So Down syndrome is a combination of different kind of findings and variations in the physical appearance and mental cognitive abilities of the children, and it was explained and described through Dr. Down. That's why the name Down syndrome, which is basically, in the new language we call it trisomy 21, which basically means an extra chromosome 21 available, which makes in total 47 chromosomes in those individuals.
The most important part of Down syndrome, which is the symptoms. What manifests, what do you see in a Down syndrome child? There is a huge array of symptoms which can affect all the organs and the physical structures of the body, right from head to toe. The head, before we go into that, there's something which is very critical here. Children with Down syndrome achieve milestones almost twice as slow as an unaffected or a normal child. For example, sitting up, crawling, walking are achieved at twice as late as in a normal child. Now, what are the presenting symptoms? What do you see in a Down syndrome child? You can see a flattened nose. You can see slanted eyes, which is not ethnically appropriate. You have a small mouth. You have a bigger tongue, so which means that a tongue protrusion of the tongue is very common. Abnormal ears. You have a short neck. And a cardinal feature of Down syndrome is a transverse palmar crease. You just have one transverse crease on your hands. Okay, then what else comes out? Like as you go down, you can find that there's a large space between the first toe and the second toe of a Down syndrome child. There's a space over there. To go internally, to begin with the brain, the most common problem attached with Down syndrome is intellectual disability. This happens almost in 99% of cases. But the good news is, usually it's mild or moderate. It's very unusual to have severe or profound levels of intellectual disability in Down syndrome. What are the other organic problems which comes up with the brain? Epilepsy. Children with Down syndrome are 1 to 13% more vulnerable or more at risk to have epilepsies. And the most common type is the infantile epilepsy, the IEs or infantile spasms as they call it, infantile spasms. Now, this can be treated, this can come very, very early, like postnatally, very early in their development. So how do they treat? Commonly treated with either vigabatrin or ACTH injections, adrenocorticotropin injections. Okay, in older people, you can actually have generalized tonic-clonic forms or the myoclonic forms of epilepsy again. What else comes up? Like you can have strokes. So how do strokes happen in children with Down syndrome? There is a syndrome called Moya-Moya syndrome. What happens in Moya-Moya? There is a gradual occlusion of the bilateral network of arteries or cerebral arteries. Occlusion. Now, the important thing is this occlusion is not because of arteriosclerosis or inflammation as commonly seen in other conditions. So as these arteries get included in the brain, they start developing collaterals. But these collateral arteries are very fragile. Now, when a child is screaming or crying or yelling or stressed out, you can have ischemic strokes or what are called cerebrovascular accidents. Now the cardinal classical feature of Down syndrome is early onset of dementias. Now, what is dementia? Or what is Alzheimer's dementia, which is the most common feature type of dementia seen in Down syndrome? Now, if we go into the genetic part, Alzheimer's dementia is caused by what is called beta amyloid proteins. Beta amyloid proteins are coded by genes which are embedded in the 21st chromosome. So bottom line, there are 3 copies in trisomy or extra genetic material. So there is more expression of this gene which codes for the beta amyloid protein. So in the end, what happens? You have more deposition of beta amyloid proteins, which again leads to neurofibrillary tangles among the neurons, and senile plaques are formed. Senile plaques are formed. And these senile plaques and the neurofibrillary tangles lead to deterioration and death of the neurons in these areas. So what is the cognitive part of dementia like? The child or the adult, young adult with Down syndrome start experiencing difficulty in thinking, in judgment, in logic. It also affects language abilities. It also affects their personality. So there is a global change in their cognitive effects due to the early onset of dementias, early onset of especially Alzheimer's dementia. Now we come to something which is more related to neuropsychiatry. The chances of having severe psychiatric problems in a Down syndrome child or a young adult is almost 18 to 36% more, which is very huge. Autism spectrum disorders, which is one of my areas of expertise, neurodevelopmental disorders, like autism spectrum. What happens in autism spectrum? The primary ability of a child to interact with people is affected. Social reciprocity becomes very difficult. Their ability to form relationships are affected. Their communication is affected, language ability is affected. They can also come up with very stereotypes, patterns of behavior, repetitive patterns of behavior, which again can look like obsessive compulsive behaviors. So other than autism spectrum disorders, children with Down syndrome can have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. They can also have behavioral disorders, mainly oppositional defiance disorders, where they tend to throw tantrums, have difficult behaviors. Again, another common neuropsychiatric manifestation is depression, which is again seen in a little bit more older people, early adulthood. And the classic feature, they can have psychotic symptoms. So you have psychotic depression. You can have pure psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, false beliefs. So these are the neurological or more common neurological effects in a Down syndrome child. Now to move downwards, you can have what happens to your heart. A critical area which affects children with Down syndrome very commonly is cardiac complications. You can have ventricular septal defects, VSDs. You can have what is called atrioventricular canal defects. What happens over here? You can have holes in the heart between the chambers. You can have the valves which control the blood flow in the heart being affected.
Having extra genetic material changes the way the brain and body develop. The physical features and medical problems associated with Down syndrome can vary widely from child to child. While some kids with Down syndrome need a lot of medical attention, others lead healthy life.
So trisomy 21 is basically determined through the fact that there is an extra chromosome available, and those individuals have 47 chromosomes. If we understand that a human being is created out of one sperm and one egg, this is the only part in human body which contains 23 chromosomes. and the sperm and the eggs are fused to one complete cell with 46 chromosomes, and out of one complete cell with 46 chromosomes, we are getting a human being with all the different cells in his body, like muscles, nerves, hair, kidneys, which every part of the body has a different function. So now if you understand that this one complete cells need to be divided and multiplied in order to create a human body, so therefore out of one cell you get 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 and so on until the human body is shaped. So if something goes wrong at early stages of this multiplication, then through the division of the cells, there could be by bad chance that in one cell you will have 3 chromosomes, and that 3 is always copy-pasted the same way. That's why all the subsequent cell lines are going to have the same 3 chromosomes, which means 3 chromosome 21, which makes in total 47 chromosomes. So hence, that is given, the older the woman are, the higher is the chance for this kind of small error in the nature. That means something goes wrong by the multiplication, and therefore there is a clear association between the mother's age and the recurrence of Down syndrome in population.
Actually, there is no particular single treatment method for Down syndrome. The treatment methods are really individualized as per their strength, their limitations, and their physical and intellectual needs. On all these basis, we are making treatment methods for them. For these children, we have to give a multidisciplinary team approach, like a social worker, physician, psychologist, speech therapist, and occupational therapist. All these professionals have to work together for improving their skills and to make better their current condition.
The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is just that little extra.